I'm not exactly the adventurous type, especially when it comes to travel. I'm a 34-year-old graphic designer from Minneapolis, and I live by routines. Same coffee shop every morning, same hoodie for late-night work, and I've used the same font combo for years. So when my boss offered to fly me out to a design conference in Portland, I was excited but also a little anxious. It was my first time traveling alone in years. I booked a small Airbnb close to the conference venue, a ground-floor unit in what looked like a quiet residential street. The photos showed a clean space with hardwood floors, exposed brick, and this cozy little reading nook that totally sold me. When I arrived that Thursday afternoon, everything looked exactly like the listing. The front steps creaked just like they did in the host's walkthrough video. A little ceramic frog sat by the welcome mat, and there was a handwritten note inside that said, "Welcome, Ava. Make yourself at home." Jay? The keypad lock clicked open smoothly, and the place smelled faintly like lemon cleaner. I remember thinking, wow, this might actually be better than a hotel. I tossed my suitcase by the sofa, plugged in my charger, and started unpacking. That's when I noticed a few off things. Nothing huge, just odd. There were 2 half-drunk water bottles in the fridge, a towel crumpled up in the hamper, and the bed looked like someone had just rolled out of it. Sheets wrinkled and the pillow indented. I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions, so I told myself it was probably just a sloppy turnover. Maybe the cleaner rushed through. I texted the host, Jason, just to let him know about the towel and the bed. He replied quickly, super casual. "Oh shoot, cleaner must have skipped a few things. So sorry, let me know if you need anything else." Seemed normal. I didn't feel unsafe, just a little annoyed. I remade the bed, tossed the towel back into the hamper, and put the water bottles in the trash. That night, I went out for dinner, walked back around 9 p.m., locked the door, and settled in. I even FaceTimed my sister to show her the place. We laughed about how very Portland it felt. Exposed beams, houseplants everywhere, and some random typewriter on a floating shelf. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like a soft thud. It wasn't loud, more like someone shifting their weight on old wooden flooring. I figured it was just the upstairs neighbor. But then I remembered, this was a single-level duplex. There shouldn't be anyone above me. I sat up, heart thumping, and listened. Nothing. Just silence. Still, it was enough to make me get up, check the lock on the bedroom door, which I hadn't even thought to use, and close the blinds tighter. I lay awake for another hour, scrolling through Instagram with the screen dimmed, just trying to distract myself until I eventually dozed off. The next morning, I noticed the cereal box I'd bought the day before was open. Not just torn a little, but actually poured. There were crumbs on the counter, and the milk carton had been moved from where I left it. I stood there staring at it, trying to logic my way through what I was seeing. Maybe I was half asleep last night and had a snack without remembering. But I'm obsessive about closing things properly, especially food. The seal was broken, like someone had just casually opened it and helped themselves. Still, I didn't panic. I texted Jason again, just to ask if anyone else might have access to the place. He didn't reply. I went to the conference, but my mind wasn't really there. I kept replaying the night before, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe I was psyching myself out because I was alone in a new city. That evening, when I got back, I did a full sweep of the apartment, checked under the bed, in the closets, even opened the cabinets. Everything looked fine. Just to be safe, I pulled my portable cam out of my luggage, a little motion-sensitive device I usually use for pet-sitting jobs. I set it up on the dresser, facing the kitchen area, mostly for my own peace of mind. I figured if anything moved, at least I'd know for sure. That night, I locked the bedroom door. Hard. I pushed a chair in front of it too, just to be extra safe. Around 1:30 a.m. I heard it again. Soft creaks, like someone trying to avoid making noise. They weren't coming from the hallway, but from above. I froze. It wasn't wind, and it wasn't pipes. It was too human. I sat there in bed, holding my breath, watching the narrow strip of light under the door. And then I saw it. Movement. A shadow low to the ground, like someone was crawling. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just laid there, paralyzed, watching that shadow pause, then retreat. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. As soon as the sun came up, I grabbed the camera and opened the footage on my laptop. What I saw made me feel physically sick. Around 1:16 a.m., the kitchen light flicked on for a second. The camera caught a figure, a man, dropping silently from the ceiling hatch in the hallway. He was barefoot, wearing a hoodie, and moving like he'd done it 100 times. He crept into the kitchen, opened the fridge, poured cereal and milk into a bowl, and sat there eating it in the dark. Then he disappeared back into the hallway and climbed back into the attic. I paused the video and stared at the hatch above the hallway, realizing I hadn't even noticed it when I arrived. I didn't know what to do. My body was buzzing with adrenaline, but my brain was foggy, like it couldn't fully process what I had just seen. I wanted to run out of there, but I was still in my pajamas, my stuff scattered everywhere, and the thought of opening the front door and finding him standing there just watching was enough to make me freeze again. So instead, I called the host, straight to voicemail. I texted, "There is someone living in the attic. I have footage. Please respond ASAP." A few minutes later, I got a reply. Just one line. "Don't confront him. Just leave now." That message nearly made my legs give out. The way he wrote him like he already knew. Not "call the cops" or "I'm on my way" or even "I'm sorry." Just leave. I grabbed my suitcase with shaking hands, shoved in my clothes and laptop as fast as I could, and didn't even zip the bag shut. I remember every second of that exit. I moved slow, terrified to make noise, eyes locked on the hallway ceiling. The hatch stayed shut. No movement. I opened the door, stepped outside, and only then did I start breathing again. I left the keys on the porch, got into my rental car, and drove until I found a hotel 20 minutes away. I didn't sleep there either, but at least the ceiling was solid. I ended up filing a report with Airbnb and sharing the footage with them. They refunded me within a day, said they'd look into the listing, and told me the unit was immediately suspended. But I never heard from them again. I tried texting Jason one last time just to ask who that guy was and how long he had been up there, but his number had been disconnected. I even searched the property online and found a Reddit post from 6 months earlier. Different guest, same neighborhood, talking about strange sounds in the attic, but no proof. I messaged them, but they never responded. It's been over a year since it happened, and I still don't have answers. I don't know who that man was. I don't know if Jason was in on it, or if he just gave up dealing with whatever nightmare was hiding above his rental. I've shown the footage to friends, and they all say the same thing. He moved like he'd done this before, like he lived there, like maybe he never left. I don't rent Airbnbs anymore. I don't even stay in guest houses. And when I move into a new place now, I check every ceiling, every crawl space, every attic. I used to think horror stories were just exaggerations online. But I lived one. And the scariest part is, I never even heard the attic hatch open. I'm 28, finishing my last semester of grad school in creative writing. And this happened just a few months ago, late October. I needed a quiet weekend to get through a pile of thesis edits and figured a little writing retreat in the countryside would help me focus. I didn't have much of a budget, so I went browsing on Airbnb and found this small house just outside a town near Cleveland. It was cheap, had decent photos, 2 bedrooms, Wi-Fi, and most importantly, available that weekend. The host's name was Darren. Profile looked legit. Reviews were all 5 stars, though most were kind of vague. Great place, very quiet, and stuff like that. I didn't think much of it at the time. I booked it Friday morning, packed up my laptop and a duffel bag, and hit the road. The drive out there was peaceful, all 2-lane roads lined with trees half-dressed in autumn colors. I pulled up around 4 p.m. The house sat by itself at the end of a gravel drive. A small single-story place with faded white paint and navy blue shutters. The lawn was patchy, unkempt, but nothing too creepy. Inside it smelled like wood and lemon cleaner. A little cold, a little empty. It wasn't dirty, just hollow, like someone had moved out in a rush. The furniture was minimal. A couch that had seen better days, a coffee table, 2 beds with mismatched sheets, and a single coat on a hook near the door. I remember that coat because it was weirdly formal, like something a man might wear to church in the 60s. Just hanging there, dusty, as if it didn't belong to anyone anymore. I was settling in, making coffee in the tiny kitchen, when I noticed the door. It was to the left of the fridge, almost hidden in the corner. At first glance, I thought it was a pantry, but when I went to open it, I realized it had been sealed. Not just locked, sealed. There were 2 thick padlocks on the outside, and about half a dozen nails along the edges, hammered in at odd angles like someone had done it fast. The wood around the handle looked scratched up, like something had tried to get out, or in. There was no mention of a basement in the listing. I actually pulled out my phone to check again right then, scrolling through the photos. Nothing. No mention of it at all. My stomach twisted a little. I told myself rural houses always have weird quirks. Old homes, strange repairs, no big deal. I left it alone. That night I worked until about 11 p.m., half dozing over my laptop in the living room, when I heard the first thud. A deep, solid thump, like someone dropping a heavy box on concrete. It came from behind that sealed door. I sat up, paused my music, and waited. A few seconds later, another thud. Same spot. I walked to the kitchen slowly, telling myself it was probably old pipes or something settling. When I pressed my ear to the wall beside the door, I didn't hear anything at first. Then came 3 knocks. Not random ones. It was spaced out. 1, 2, pause, 1. Like a pattern. I stepped back. My skin felt tight all over. And then, in a voice so soft I questioned if I imagined it, I heard my name. Ethan. I didn't sleep that night. I left every light on in the house and kept the TV playing low just so I wouldn't feel so isolated. Every so often I'd hear creaks from the kitchen or what sounded like shifting floorboards, but I tried to write it off as the house settling. That's what people say, right? Old house noises. But nothing about that door felt normal. Around 2 a.m., I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the front doorknob. I knew it wouldn't help if someone or something really wanted in, but it made me feel slightly less helpless. I even debated driving into town to get a motel, but I'd had a couple beers and didn't trust myself on those winding roads in the dark. The next morning, sunlight made everything feel a little less crazy. I told myself I must have been overtired. I opened a window for fresh air, made toast, and tried to get back to work. But I kept glancing at the basement door. That coat by the entryway still hung there like a scarecrow in a church pew, untouched. I texted the host, Darren, something casual. Hey, quick question. What's up with the sealed door near the kitchen? Basement? A couple hours passed. No reply. Then just before noon, my phone vibrated. One message. No greeting, no explanation. Just, don't open it. Ignore whatever you hear. My heart dropped. I reread it maybe 6 times, like maybe there was some joke I was missing, but it didn't feel like a joke. After that, I started checking the locks. I took a picture of the door with my phone. Both padlocks were still there, nails all intact. But I noticed something off. One of the nails looked like it had been pulled out partway and hammered back in, like someone had tried to loosen it, then gave up. I didn't do that. I know I didn't. I barely even touched the thing. I tried to convince myself maybe the host had come by and checked it without letting me know. Maybe he didn't want me poking around. Maybe there was some kind of mold issue or structural damage. But none of those explanations made sense. That night I planned to sleep in the car just in case. I went out around sunset, only to find my tires slashed. All 4 of them, clean, deep cuts, like someone used a box cutter or a hunting knife. I stood there for a long time, just staring, cold air hitting the back of my neck. I kept scanning the tree line around the property, but I didn't see anyone. No footprints in the dirt driveway, no sound, no help. I tried calling 911, but of course, no signal. Not even a single bar. I walked in a full circle holding my phone up like an idiot, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. It was getting dark, and I realized I had no choice but to spend another night in that house. That second night was worse. The sound started earlier, just after 9 p.m. First it was footsteps. Slow, dragging ones that moved across the floor beneath me. Then came the knocking again, harder this time, rhythmic, angry, and after that, scratching, like long fingernails or claws dragging against wood. I sat frozen on the couch, holding a kitchen knife I'd grabbed earlier, as if that would help. At some point, I heard something that shook me completely. A voice, from behind the door, louder now. It said, "Please let me out. I'm cold." It sounded like a kid, maybe 10 years old. But the way it spoke, there was something off, like the words were practiced, performed. The tone didn't match the message. Too calm, too rehearsed. I wanted to run, but I couldn't leave. Not with slashed tires, no phone service, and nothing but woods in every direction. I considered breaking a window and just walking until I found someone, but it was pitch black out there and freezing. I thought about trying to unscrew the hinges, see what was behind the door just to end the guessing, but then I remembered the message from Darren. Don't open it. Why? What the hell had happened here? What had someone sealed inside that basement? I started writing a note on my laptop just in case. Something simple. If I disappeared, at least someone would know where I was, what I saw. I left it on the desktop and saved it as "read this first." The night stretched on like a punishment. Around 3 a.m. the power flickered and went out completely. I was alone in the dark, no lights, no heater, no sound except whatever was behind that goddamn door. That's when I swear I saw it move. The door. It bowed outward, just slightly, like pressure was building behind it. I didn't stay to see more. I locked myself in the bathroom with my backpack and a flashlight, and stayed there until morning, barely blinking. Every time the house creaked, I thought it was coming for me. I don't even remember falling asleep, just waking up to sunlight through the tiny bathroom window. By the time the sun was fully up, the power had returned. I rushed out, packed everything, and started walking the main road, hoping a car would pass. After maybe 40 minutes, a mail truck finally pulled over and gave me a ride into town. I called a tow company, booked a motel for the night, and never went back to that house. I didn't leave a review. I didn't message Darren again. A week later, the listing disappeared from Airbnb completely. Gone like it never existed. I still don't know what was behind that door. I don't want to. But sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I swear I hear that knock. 1, 2, pause. 1. I was 26 when this happened, and I still think about it more often than I'd like to admit. At the time, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was in a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend Mike, who lived in Savannah. We had been seeing each other for almost a year, and we made this little plan to meet halfway in Charleston for a weekend together. I booked a cute one-bedroom Airbnb just outside the historic district, a small white house with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. It looked safe, private, and had good reviews. My plan was to check in late Friday night after work, since Mike had to work overtime and wouldn't arrive until the next morning. I got there around 11:30 p.m. It was quiet, almost unnervingly so. The porch light was on, casting this sickly yellow glow over the front steps. I remember rolling my suitcase up to the door and pulling up the check-in instructions on my phone. The listing said the keypad would be locked and that I just needed to punch in the code. But when I got there, the keypad was already glowing green. That was the first moment something felt off. I hadn't even touched it yet. No code entered. Just green, like it was already unlocked and ready for someone to walk in. I paused. I stood there for a good minute just staring at it, suddenly hyper-aware of the silence around me. No dogs barking, no cars passing, no cicadas. I tried to tell myself that maybe the cleaner had just forgotten to lock it after cleaning. But it was almost midnight. That seemed sloppy. Still, I didn't have many options. My phone battery was at 9%, Mike was hours away, and I wasn't about to drive around Charleston at midnight looking for a hotel, so I stepped inside slowly. Every light in the place was off, but I could see just enough from the streetlight through the blinds to tell that nothing looked ransacked. In fact, everything was perfectly in place. Too perfectly. The house was spotless, like unnaturally clean. The kind of clean that feels sterile, not cozy. I flicked on a few lights and walked through the place. Kitchen, living room, tiny hallway, leading to the bedroom and bathroom. Nothing seemed wrong, but there was this lingering smell, barely noticeable, like fast food that had been sitting out and then thrown away. I checked the trash can in the kitchen. Empty. Bathroom trash? Empty. Everything looked untouched. I still tried to laugh it off. I even texted Mike. Weird start, lol. The keypad was already green. Place is creepily clean. If I get murdered, you know where to send the cops. He didn't reply. I found out later he was asleep already. The first night I didn't sleep that well. Not because of any noise or anything happening. Actually, that's what bothered me. It was too quiet. No creaks, no AC hum, no fridge clicking on. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs, and there's always some kind of background noise. This place felt like it was holding its breath. I left a lamp on in the hallway, just for some comfort light, and eventually dozed off around 2 a.m. The next morning, Mike arrived around 9. He brought coffee and breakfast, and I felt instantly better. We spent the whole day out, exploring the market, walking around the Battery, doing normal couple stuff. For a while, I completely forgot about the weird keypad thing. But when we got back that evening, something felt slightly different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The house looked the same. Everything still clean. Nothing obviously moved. But when I went to plug in my phone, my charger was gone. I always leave it by the couch. I'm borderline neurotic about that kind of thing. I even checked the bag I'd packed it in, but it wasn't there either. Mike joked that I probably left it in the car, but I knew I hadn't. Still, I let it go. We were tired, and the last thing I wanted was to start spiraling over something stupid. Later that night, Mike took a shower while I scrolled through my phone in bed. I reached down to grab my hairbrush from my overnight bag, and it wasn't there. At that point, I actually laughed out loud, but not in a funny way. More like a what the hell is going on kind of laugh. First the charger, now the brush. And that's when I remembered. I'd packed a pair of fuzzy socks to sleep in. I'd taken one out the night before and left the other in my suitcase. I opened my bag again, just to check. One sock. Gone. I don't care how messy you are. Socks don't just walk away. The mood shifted after that. I tried to explain it to Mike, but I could tell he thought I was being dramatic. He said something like, maybe the cleaner came back and realized they forgot to do something? But the thing is, nothing was changed. No towels moved, no dishes washed, no signs that anyone had done any kind of cleaning. If someone had come back, it was for something else. I didn't want to admit how uneasy I felt, but it was crawling up my spine by then. That feeling that someone had been there recently, not hours ago, minutes. The breaking point for me was the receipt. It was late Sunday morning, and Mike had already left early to head back to Savannah for work. I stayed behind to check out a little later and clean up. While gathering our stuff, I bent down to pick up my hoodie that had fallen next to the nightstand. And there it was. A crumpled receipt, wedged just underneath the edge of the rug. It was from a fast food place about 10 minutes from the house. The timestamp said 2:42 p.m., just over 2 hours before I had checked in Friday night. And the weirdest part? The order was for 2 meals, 2 drinks. Someone had eaten in that house the same day I arrived. Someone who shouldn't have been there. And they didn't bother cleaning up completely. I called the Airbnb host immediately. She sounded genuinely confused and apologized profusely, said the cleaners were supposed to be out of there by noon. She offered to refund one night, but I wasn't even thinking about the money at that point. I just wanted to get out. I packed up my stuff so fast my hands were shaking. Before I left, I decided to shower quickly, just to get the road grime off me before the drive. That's when the last thing happened. I'd left my phone on the bathroom counter, and while I was rinsing shampoo out of my hair, I heard the little buzz sound it makes for notifications. I assumed it was Mike. But when I looked after drying off, it wasn't a text. It was a motion alert from my security camera app. I'd set it up to monitor the front door camera on the Airbnb, something I do whenever I travel alone. It said, "Motion detected. Front door opened." My heart jumped. I checked the live view, but the porch was empty. Then I went to the saved clip. What I saw made me feel like my stomach dropped into my shoes. It wasn't someone coming in. It was someone leaving. A tall man, wearing a black hoodie, walking out calmly, while I was in the shower. He didn't run. He didn't even look at the camera. He just opened the door like he owned the place and stepped out. I didn't even dry my hair. I threw everything into my suitcase, zipped it half closed, and bolted. I didn't even care if I left anything behind. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few seconds, shaking, watching the front door to see if it would open again. It didn't. But I swear, in my rearview mirror as I pulled away, I saw something move behind the curtain in the front room. Not a shadow, not my imagination. Just the softest ripple, like someone had gently pushed the fabric aside to peek out. I didn't go home right away. I drove straight to a crowded coffee shop downtown and just sat there for almost 2 hours, trying to calm down. I called Mike, explained everything, showed him the video. He went quiet. Then he asked the question that's haunted me since. What if he was already in the house when you got there Friday night? The green keypad, the fast food smell, the receipt, the missing items. Someone had been inside before I arrived, and maybe they never left. Maybe they watched us the entire weekend, hid in a closet or under the bed while we slept, crept around while we were out, waited for moments when we were vulnerable. I sent the footage to the Airbnb host, who went into full panic mode. She said no one else was supposed to have access, and the cleaner swore up and down she'd locked up and left hours before my check-in. The host said she'd call the police, but I did it myself anyway. They took a report, reviewed the footage, but nothing ever came of it. The man's face wasn't visible. No forced entry, no stolen property. Just unexplained access and a list of unsettling coincidences. I never heard from the host again, and the listing disappeared from the platform about a week later. For a while, I kept obsessively checking the footage again and again. hoping I'd missed something that would make it all make sense. But the more I looked, the worse it felt. His posture was casual, his pace slow, like he knew I wouldn't be done with my shower for at least another few minutes, like he'd been timing it, watching, listening. I started thinking about all the little moments from that weekend, when I thought I saw movement in the hallway mirror, or when Mike said the fridge door was cracked open even though we hadn't used it yet. I'd brushed those things off at the time. Now they felt like red flags I'd ignored. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb since. I only book hotels now. I double-check every lock. I bring a doorstop alarm and keep my phone recording when I shower. And even though it's been over a year, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that shower, if I'd come out early, or if I hadn't seen that alert until hours later. I don't know who he was or how long he'd been in that house, but I do know one thing: he wasn't afraid. He wasn't rushing. He walked out like it was his house, and maybe for a while, it was. I'm a 31-year-old software consultant, and earlier this year I spent a week in Tempe, Arizona for a quiet solo work trip. I didn't want a hotel, too sterile, too noisy, so I booked this little guest house listed on Airbnb. It was behind a normal suburban home, nothing fancy, but it had great reviews and looked clean. The host, someone named Doug, left the key in a lockbox and messaged me once to say, "Welcome. Let me know if you need anything." First 2 days were uneventful. I worked during the day, grabbed takeout at night, and appreciated how peaceful the neighborhood was. The only real sound was the occasional distant bark of a dog or a sprinkler hissing to life just before dawn. The place itself was cozy: small studio layout, wood floors, a kitchenette, and this weirdly thick curtain over the single window that looked out onto the backyard. I remember thinking it blocked more light than it should, like it was meant to keep something in, not out. But I shrugged it off. On the second night, I went to bed around midnight after watching something dumb on my laptop. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I expected a spam email or maybe a message from a friend in a different time zone. But no, it was Doug, the host. The message just said, "Are you awake? Did you hear that?" It immediately put me on edge. I sat up in bed, stared at the glowing message, and reread it a few times. I hadn't heard anything. No knocking, no sirens, no footsteps. Just that humming suburban silence. I thought maybe he'd sent it to the wrong guest. I didn't reply, but 10 minutes later, another buzz. This time, "Don't come outside." That one hit differently. My stomach dropped. I got out of bed slowly and padded across the floor to the window, peeled the curtain just enough to peek out. Porch lights from the main house were on, but the yard was still. Nothing moved. No people. No animals. Just the sway of a wind chime hanging near the back door, catching a breeze I couldn't hear from inside. I hardly slept after that. Every creak in the walls felt deliberate. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message, but nothing else came. The next morning I debated texting Doug to ask what that was all about, but when I stepped outside to head to the corner cafe, he was standing in his driveway, watering a patch of flowers like everything was perfectly normal. He even gave me a casual wave and said, "Sleep okay?" I just nodded. I didn't want to look weird, especially if I'd misread the situation. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake this feeling, like he was testing how much I'd noticed. That night, I triple-checked that the guest house door was locked. I even dragged the little kitchenette table in front of it, just to feel like I had some kind of barrier. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe Doug was just a quirky guy with bad timing. Still, I left my shoes by the bed, phone on silent but in my hand, and slept with the overhead light on. Around 3:01 a.m. again, like clockwork, my phone buzzed. The first message said, "Please stay inside." Don't make noise. 30 seconds later, another. He was closer last night. I read them over and over, heart pounding. I couldn't tell if he was trying to scare me, protect me, or if he was just unstable. I stared at the curtain for what felt like an hour before daring to look outside. Again, nothing. Just darkness and the faint hum of a nearby AC unit. By morning, the tension in my chest had calcified into a constant tightness. I didn't want to be alone in that place another night, but I didn't have anywhere else to go without eating a few $100. At that point, I figured I'd at least try to talk to Doug about it. He wasn't outside this time, so I messaged him through the Airbnb app. I kept it casual. "Hey Doug, just wanted to check if those messages were meant for me? Wondering if everything's all right." He read the message almost immediately but didn't reply. Hours passed. I left for a walk, got groceries, tried to keep myself busy, but the silence was louder than anything he could have said. That night, the messages started again. This time they came faster. 3:07 a.m. You need to stay quiet. 3:08 a.m. Don't even look out the window. 3:10 a.m. He listens when you move. That last one did something to me. It cracked the part of my brain that had been trying to rationalize all of this. I suddenly felt exposed, like I'd been walking around naked and just now realized it. I turned off the light, sat down on the bed, and I listened, really listened. And for the first time, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a kind of dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across dirt. It came from the backyard, right behind the guest house wall. I sat there frozen, barely breathing. The dragging stopped, then a sharp knock. Just once. Not on the door. On the outside wall, right behind my head. I didn't sleep at all that night. At sunrise, I grabbed my laptop bag and walked out without brushing my teeth or even changing my shirt. I told myself I was going to get breakfast, but really, I just needed space to think. I sat in my rental car at the local Starbucks for almost 2 hours, watching the entrance, feeling like I was being followed even though I knew I wasn't. I checked the guest house listing again. Still live, still 5-star reviews. Still glowing comments like, "Super peaceful stay," and "Doug was so respectful." Were they fake? Or was I the only one getting these messages? That afternoon, I made up my mind to leave. I figured I'd lose the money but keep my sanity. I started packing, keeping one eye on the window, and that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The curtain rod above the window was mounted on the inside wall, but the curtain itself was attached from the outside. It wasn't blocking light from coming in, it was blocking anyone from seeing out. I stepped closer and saw the tiny holes where screws had once gone through both the wall and the frame. Someone had reinstalled it that way on purpose. I got this horrible mental image of someone standing in the yard, looking in, completely invisible behind the curtain. I didn't even finish packing. I shoved my laptop into my backpack, grabbed my keys, and walked straight out the front door without looking back. I drove to a motel near the freeway and booked a last-minute room. Just a single night. I couldn't even bring myself to cancel the Airbnb yet. I didn't want to give Doug any clue I was leaving early. That night, no messages, no knocks, just the buzz of the motel vending machine and the sound of traffic in the distance. I felt oddly grateful for that noise, like it meant I was back in the world again. The next morning, I reported the listing to Airbnb. I didn't accuse him of anything specific. I just said the host had sent disturbing messages at odd hours. I got a canned response thanking me, and a few days later the listing was still up. I blocked Doug's number, changed my account photo. That should have been the end of it. But 2 weeks later, I got an email from a burner address. No subject line. The body of the message just said, "You were lucky. He didn't see you." I still don't know if it was from Doug. I never responded. I haven't booked an Airbnb since. These days I stick to hotels, even the crappy ones with broken ice machines and paper-thin walls. At least there, the only thing watching you is a hallway camera and a bored teenager at the front desk. I never figured out who he was. I'm not sure I want to. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night and the room gets too quiet, I remember that dragging sound. And I wonder how close he really got. I'm a freelance journalist, 38, and most of my assignments keep me moving from city to city, living out of suitcases and short-term rentals. Back in March, I was in Minneapolis to cover a high-profile murder trial that had gripped the Midwest. The court was only a few blocks from my Airbnb, so I'd booked this upscale apartment in a restored brownstone. Modern furnishings, open floor plan, way nicer than the places I usually stay. The kind of place that made you feel like you were borrowing someone else's life for a week. At the time, I was just exhausted, sleeping 4 hours a night, editing articles by day, reviewing court transcripts by night. I didn't want complications. I just wanted a bed, Wi-Fi, and coffee. The apartment had this long, narrow hallway that led to the bathroom and bedroom, with 2 closets along the left-hand side. One was filled with towels and spare sheets. The other had a heavy-duty silver padlock on it and a little laminated sign that read, in polite script, "Owner's storage, do not open." Nothing weird about that. I've seen it in dozens of Airbnbs, usually just cleaning supplies or old decorations. I didn't give it a second thought. The lock seemed solid, like the kind used on backyard sheds, and the door didn't rattle or anything. But what did catch my attention was that every time I passed by, I felt this weird drop in temperature. Subtle, like walking past a vent with the AC cranked too high. I chalked it up to bad insulation and moved on. It was on my 3rd night that I heard the sound. I'd just finished filing a late article and was getting ready for bed, when I heard this light rustling, not loud, but distinct, coming from the hallway. At first I thought maybe the wind was hitting a vent or something had shifted in the walls. But then it came again, clearer this time. A sort of shuffling sound, like fabric brushing against wood, or someone moving very slowly, trying not to be heard. I stood frozen in the kitchen, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling. I even laughed to myself, the kind of nervous laugh that says I'm not scared, just tired. But when I walked toward the hallway, it went dead silent. Like whatever it was had stopped and was waiting. The next morning, still a little uneasy, I messaged the host, a woman named Angela, to ask if she'd ever had rodent problems. I tried to keep it casual, said I'd heard some noises and wanted to make sure it wasn't mice or raccoons in the walls. She replied about an hour later with a short, polite message. "Hi, we've never had any pest issues reported, but I can have someone come check. The building's old, sometimes it creaks. Let me know if it gets worse." That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Something about how fast she answered and how little she asked in return felt off, like she knew what I was talking about, but didn't want to engage. That night, I did something stupid. Or smart. I'm still not sure. I took a glass tumbler from the kitchen, filled it halfway with water, and placed it on the hardwood floor right in front of the locked closet. I figured if it was just the house creaking or some small animal in the walls, nothing would happen. But if the sound was coming from inside the closet, well, I'd know. I even took a picture on my phone so I could compare the cup's position later. Then I brushed my teeth, left the hallway light on low, and went to bed. I didn't sleep well. I kept checking the time on my phone like every half hour, heart racing without reason. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is waking up suddenly. No noise, no dream, just awake. I checked the time. 3:03 a.m. My room was dead silent, not even traffic outside. I sat up, listening. Then it came again. That same rustling, but this time louder. And then, thud. A sharp sound, like something hitting wood. I got up and walked down the hallway slowly, carefully. The light was still on. The glass was on its side. Water spilled across the floor in a long, uneven arc. The air was cold near the closet, way colder than it should have been. I stood there staring at the lock, expecting it to move, twist, fall off, anything. But it didn't. Nothing happened. Eventually, I wiped up the spill, put the glass back in the sink, and told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't focus the next day. I kept checking my phone, staring at the photo of the glass standing upright and wondering what the hell could have knocked it over. I even skipped the second half of the court session just to come back and check the place again in daylight. Nothing looked different. Closet still locked. Hallway still quiet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in there. That I'd heard it. That it had felt me. Around 6 p.m., I decided to call the non-emergency police line. I didn't want to sound like a lunatic, so I kept it vague. Told them I'd heard noises coming from a locked closet, and I didn't feel safe. They said they'd send someone by in a couple hours to check it out. By the time the officers showed up, it was almost 9 p.m. 2 of them came in, a younger guy named Thompson and an older woman named Ruiz. I showed them the closet, explained everything, even showed the photo of the water glass. Thompson gave me the kind of look people save for ghost stories and drunks, but Ruiz took it seriously. She asked me if I'd touched the lock. I told her no. She put on gloves, crouched, and examined it. Then she stood up and said, "This thing's been tampered with." That made my stomach drop. I asked her what she meant, and she pointed to the back of the latch. There were tiny, fresh scratches on the metal, and a faint streak of something dark near the base. She tapped the lock. It wobbled slightly, like it wasn't fully secure. Ruiz radioed it in and asked me to stay back as she and Thompson got permission to cut the lock. He retrieved a small bolt cutter from the trunk of the cruiser, and I watched from the end of the hallway as he clipped the shank. The lock snapped with this soft metallic clink, like it had already been halfway broken. What I remember most is how slowly they opened the door. It creaked, loud, dramatic, like something out of a horror movie. But there was no jump scare, no person, no rat, no noise. The closet was empty, except it wasn't. There was a torn white t-shirt crumpled near the back wall, stiff like it had dried in place. And above it, claw marks. 4 of them. Deep, uneven gashes in the drywall, about 2 feet long and spaced like fingers. Human-shaped, but longer. Wrong. Thompson muttered, "Jesus," and Ruiz pulled out her flashlight. I stepped closer, even though my legs didn't want to move. There was something smeared near the scratches, dark brown, almost black. Not enough to drip, but enough to notice. Ruiz didn't say it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. Blood. Old blood. She bagged the shirt, took a few pictures, and then quietly stepped out of the apartment to make some calls. Thompson stayed with me, but neither of us talked. I just kept staring at the inside of that closet like it would give me answers if I stared hard enough. I asked him, half joking, "You think someone was living in there?" He didn't answer. They filed a report, said they'd be in touch if they found anything, but I never heard back. I asked the host the next morning if she'd known about the closet damage, but she just said, "I'll look into it," and refunded me half my stay. I packed up that same day and booked a hotel downtown, even though it was overpriced and smelled like chlorine. I just needed out. The weirdest part? The Airbnb listing was still up a few weeks later. Same photos, same description, but the closet wasn't in any of them. Like it had been wiped clean from the narrative. I flagged it, but nothing happened. The listing eventually disappeared a couple months later. To this day, I have no idea what the hell was in that closet. I've tried rationalizing it, squatters, mental illness, a former tenant sneaking in somehow. But the scratches? They weren't made with tools. They were too organic. And the water glass? It hadn't tipped. It had been kicked. Hard. Whatever was in there, it didn't want to be found. Or maybe it did, and that was the part that scared me most. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb since. I was 22 when this happened, about halfway through a month-long solo backpacking trip across the U.S. South. It was October, still warm during the day, but with that eerie early sunset that always made unfamiliar places feel a little off. I'd just gotten to Georgia, and after spending way too much money in Asheville, I looked for a cheap place to crash for a few nights. I found this Airbnb in a small town outside Atlanta. It wasn't fancy, but the listing had solid reviews, and the photos showed a clean, private room on the second floor of a quiet house. The price was low enough that I booked it without thinking twice. The host was an older woman named Lorraine, maybe late 60s. She opened the door with a kind of stiff politeness, like she wasn't used to hosting but was trying to make it work. Gray hair in a low bun, gold chain around her neck, bare feet with red toenail polish. Not unfriendly, just distant. She didn't offer a house tour or anything, just pointed toward the stairs and said, "Your room's at the top, bathrooms across the hall." I thanked her, dropped my backpack, and headed up. The house was definitely older, narrow wooden staircase, floral wallpaper peeling in some corners, but the room was cozy. A small window overlooking the street, one twin bed, a dresser with a mirror, and that old house smell of lemon cleaner and dust. That first evening I made myself some ramen in the shared kitchen, then went back up to journal and pass out early. I'd been on the road for nearly a week by then, and all I wanted was a long, uninterrupted night of sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, just outside my door. I froze. The floorboards creaked like someone was pacing back and forth, maybe 3 or 4 steps, then stopping. Then came a knock, 2 soft raps, on the bathroom door directly across the hall. I waited, holding my breath. No voices, no door opening. Just silence after that. I figured Lorraine must have had another guest staying downstairs, or maybe a long-term tenant. It wasn't unusual for hosts to rent out multiple rooms, and I hadn't asked. Still, it gave me a weird feeling. I ended up sleeping with my headphones in after that. Volume low, but enough to drown out any more creaking. The next morning, I went down for coffee and casually asked Lorraine, "Hey, just out of curiosity, do you have another guest here?" She looked at me with this soft frown, like I'd asked something in another language. Then she shook her head. "No, you're the only one this week." That answer stuck with me. The way she said it, calm, casual, no hesitation, made me second-guess myself. Maybe I'd imagined the footsteps, or maybe Lorraine was just trying not to scare me. I let it go and spent the day exploring the nearby town. Came back late afternoon, took a shower, and curled up with a book. Around midnight I turned off the light and tried to sleep. It was quiet for a while, but then, like clockwork, the floorboards started creaking again. Same spot, same slow pacing. This time I got up and peeked through the crack in my door. The hallway was empty, but the bathroom door across from me was shut, and I swear, I hadn't seen it closed when I went to bed. I stared at it for a while, heart thudding like a drum in my throat. No shadows, no sound from inside. Just the same silence as the night before. I told myself maybe Lorraine used it and forgot to mention it. Maybe she didn't want guests using her private bathroom. But the vibe was all wrong. You know when a place just feels wrong? That was it. That hallway felt watched, like I was interrupting something I wasn't supposed to see. The next morning, I brought it up again, gently. I told Lorraine I thought I'd heard someone out in the hall and saw the bathroom door closed. Her reaction was unsettling. She paused, then said, "Honey, I haven't used that bathroom in years. Pipes rusted shut. I keep it closed." I asked if she had cameras around the house, just to ease my nerves, and to my surprise, she said yes. There was one on the stairwell pointing toward the hallway. "Just for safety," she said. I asked if I could see it, half joking, expecting nothing. But Lorraine shrugged and told me she'd pull up the footage later that day. That night after dinner, she knocked on my door and invited me downstairs to the living room. She had the footage pulled up on her tablet. It was in black and white and grainy, but I could clearly see myself going up the stairs when I first arrived. Fast forward to 2:12 a.m. the previous night, and there he was, a man, just standing at the bottom of the stairs. Tall, lean, wearing a hoodie with the hood down, and something off about the way he held his arms. Stiff, like they were pinned to his sides. He never came up, never left, just stood there, for hours. I just sat there staring at the screen. I couldn't even speak. Lorraine was watching me, waiting for me to react, and I think she expected me to laugh it off. But I couldn't. There was something deeply wrong with the way he stood. Too still, like he wasn't just loitering or lost. He was waiting for something or someone. I asked Lorraine if she recognized him, and she gave the tiniest shake of her head. "No one's supposed to be here but you and me," she said. I asked if the door downstairs was locked. "Always," she replied. But I didn't feel reassured. I barely slept that night. I pushed the dresser in front of the door and kept my phone flashlight in one hand, a pocket knife in the other. I didn't hear footsteps, and the hallway stayed quiet, but I kept waking up every 20 minutes, checking the crack beneath the door for movement. The silence was worse than the sounds had been. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I packed my things as soon as the sun rose and told Lorraine I needed to leave early. She didn't argue. In fact, she seemed relieved. Like maybe she felt it too, whatever that presence was. Before I left, she asked if I wanted a copy of the footage. I told her no. I didn't want that image burned into my mind more than it already was. She walked me out, gave me a tight, awkward hug, and said, "It's better you're going. This house has too much memory." That line still echoes in my head sometimes. I don't know what she meant. I don't think I want to. I drove to a diner 2 towns over and sat in the parking lot for an hour just trying to stop shaking. I canceled the rest of my Airbnb stays after that and started using cheap motels instead. I didn't care how sketchy they looked. At least I could see who was coming and going. It's been 2 years now. I still have no clue who that man was, how he got in, or why he didn't move. I never reported it. I figured no one would take it seriously without something actually happening. But sometimes, when I'm alone in a hallway, especially at night, I remember the way those floorboards creaked, the way the bathroom door closed without a sound. And that still frame burned into my brain. Him at the foot of the stairs, arms stiff, eyes probably fixed right on the ceiling above him. Right on me. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who stayed with me until the end. See you next time.